Hi everyone, I want to show you my current 150 solo GR setup for my Necromancer that I'm pushing with. And I have perfected my gear almost entirely so far, and it's probably gonna stay the way it is now. And I think I've also found the most optimal and fun setup for myself. So it is a very greedy version of the set. So I'm playing the Bone Spear here, and we have the Briggs Wrath. Do you see some other clears with Captain Crimson and also with Orgul's set? And the main difference between those is the Briggs Wrath. So you can pull enemies together with this, and the other setups can't. So they are like much more slow paced, much more reliant on getting a good rift and getting the right pulls, and you kite stuff through the rift. And here I play very differently by just rushing in, pulling stuff together and blasting it with the Bone Spear. So this is the main change here. And for my gear, we have some pretty good stuff. So here's my Untitled Cycle. You might have seen this one. I got very lucky with this, but this is pretty much perfect. Intelligence could be area damage, so yeah, slight improvement is possible, but not very much. This is pretty much a perfect Briggs here. Besides the secondary res, cold is not so useful. The gloves here, I used to roll area damage at first, and then I changed to get a bit more attack speed. The thing is that on tier 150 the boss fights are horribly long, so anywhere up to like 5-6 minutes or so on a single target without a pylon is not uncommon, even with those attack speed rolls. So I took this and this, which previously was 44 area damage, and now we have quite a few breakpoints higher, and we can kill the bosses around a minute faster. So this is quite useful, because most of the time when you have a big pull, you're gonna destroy it anyway. And on a small pulse, attack speed also helps you quite a bit to finish off the last like leftover enemies. So theoretically, I would even go for a bit more attack speed, maybe one more ring or so. And as long as I stay like above 100, I would be quite fine, I believe. Even with the Briggs Wrath, I think that you don't need to stack that much area damage, because yeah, the boss fights just become so long later on. If you are pushing lower tiers, let's say 140 or so, boss fights are not such an issue. They last like 2-3 minutes or so maximum. But towards the higher tiers, they just have so much HP that you should probably go for this. Here my shoulders, they are pretty good with 8 cooldown, 20 area. You could replace the cooldown. I don't really need it, but it does help a bit with the fluidity, so I can blood rush a bit more, so this can be quite nice. We have a really good helm here, physical res 6 and 15, so this is basically as good as it gets, but we are lacking a lot of crowd control resistance. So crowd control resistance is quite important on Necro, because you don't have any SCC immunity, you don't have a transformation skill like Demon Hunter Vengeance, for example. So whenever there's like some nightmarish elites, some knockbacks, slows, frozen, like anything that hits you is gonna be a big issue. And I only have one roll here on my amulet. 24% is not too much. And best case, you have like 2 or 3 items that have this, and then the crowd control effects are not really so noticeable, besides knockback maybe. But everything else just disappears quite fast when you have like 50% plus, or even like 70% plus. So here we have very little. Talking about the amulet, this one is actually my weakest piece, I guess, of my gear. So yeah, it is decent. It has ancient, but it has the poison and the crit damage. But of course it's like in the crit chance, so I was trying pretty hard to reforge this to crit instead of intelligence. Didn't get anything. I had like one non-ancient with pretty scuffed crit roll and poison, but I chose to go with this one here because it was very similar damage. Intelligence also gives a bit of toughness, and we had a crowd control reduction. Here the bracers, I reforged those. Before that I had some non-ancients of 392. So they are almost as good as it gets, no secondary unfortunately, but still pretty nice, and with that we can be quite happy. It's quite hard to get good bracers here because the range is quite high, and the affix actually makes a huge difference. So even the 7% I'm missing there is a rough like 2% DPS increase or so if I could get it, or 1.5 to 2%, and it would be a pretty decent upgrade still. Here's the dainties, nothing really special, just ancient with 50%. We have some pretty decent pants, but they're also not hard to get. I rolled a physical res here. Just in general, intelligence classes don't care too much about the secondary resists, so as long as you get anything, you're usually happy, because you have high intelligence, you have high aura anyway. But you can see my physical res is really high here, 3,500. So it does make a bit of the difference. So when you look at this, I take around 9% physical damage, and I take around 10.6% cold damage, for example. So like the relative difference is still something like 15 to 20% less damage taken on physical if you combine all these physical resist rolls. And that can be quite noticeable in some cases. Here's my boots. They're also pretty nuts with the physical and the 14% bone spear. Really nice. Here's my offhand. So I did show my offhand collection in another video, so I'm not going to go over all of them again, but I do have others that have all stats that you want, which is the crit, the bone spear, the area, and the essence. But they're mostly bone ringers. And the reason why bone ringer always rolls so well is because it always has crit and the other offhands don't. And that includes Lost Time. Lost Time is the only offhand that would do anything for this build, and that's also the reason why I have this one instead of one of the better rolled ones. I really like the movement speed here. In fact, we also have the Steward's Greaves in my setup, and like this I get 150% bonus movement speed. I'm super fast, and this is not even my full speed here, because right now we're not hitting anything. And this Lost Time has a much better effect than the additional bone spear damage for me. So, but if I could get the bone spear, I could remove the vitality. I probably put it back in the paragons, so you would lose 1000 int, which is like around 4% damage. And then the bone spear could give us something like 10-11% upgrade or so. So pretty significant upgrade you could get, but it's almost impossible to get such a Lost Time because it rolls so many stats, so many skills, and you're basically never gonna see one like that. So you can probably try like 3000 bounty materials and you would have a decent chance. But yeah, I tried like around 1000 for all my gear, and the rest was just from running rats and from loot sharing and finding my stuff myself. And yeah, this is about it, so it's not gonna get better. Here's my convention, nothing special. Yeah, crit great area, non-ancient, no secondary. It's just an okay roll, I guess. And yeah, this is about it for the gear here. So here's my skill setup. I did change it a little bit from what I started with. Most importantly, we have the Blood Rush metabolism. So I used to run with Transfusion. The reason being that you want to wait with the curse to get more Briggs Wrath value. So I showed this recently in a video how to Briggs Wrath properly. And basically you want to wait until shortly before a convention cycle to Briggs stuff together, and it will stay in place because of the Decrepify Enfeeblement rune, reducing the movement speed by 100%. So for a few seconds after you Briggs them together, all the enemies will be pixeled, and they will not move, but you can't do it too early. And as long as you don't have anything cursed, you are super squishy. You're losing the Dainty's binding, you're losing the, I think 30% damage reduction from Decrepify, and yeah, in general, like, stuff is also much faster because they're not slowed, and yeah, you have a hard time surviving in some cases. The extra movement speed I have is pretty good for this because I can just run around, I can run circles, I can dodge. So as long as you do that well, this setup works. But if you want to play greedy, you need to be very careful. And for this, I go even more greedy. I don't go Transfusion to heal myself because I basically intend to not get hit at all until I curse. And then, you're safe. You get a damage reduction, you can heal easily from the Leech Curse that you get from having all runes on Simulacrum. That gives you all the curses, and then you're fine. So I just use this so I can more easily run around, make the pulls, and basically the whole setup revolves around running from pull to pull between your 12-second convention cycles. So you don't have much time. You have like between 6 and maybe 10 seconds on your timer to run to the next pull, pick it together, and blast it. You have to be very fast on your toes to make this happen. Other than that, the rest is pretty straightforward. We have the Grim Scythe, Frost Scythe for the attack speed. No other generator really does anything. Bone Spear, Blighted Marrow, nothing special there. Bone Armor Dislocation for the stun. And I guess the passives are a bit special. So before we were running with Final Service, and I didn't have Overwhelming Essence. So out of these DPS passives, we have Spreading Malediction and Overwhelming Essence. Overwhelming Essence is roughly a 10% DPS increase with Rylina's Shadowhook. So you could just change this to Final Service again. It makes the build much easier to survive with. But I became greedy and I went with the full DPS setup here. And well, if you're good at dodging, you can actually survive like this with this setup, even without the extra damage reduction that we would gain from Raz's Volition or Achilla Cuirass perhaps. To compensate, I actually have a lot of vitality. I have 8000 vitality. So on top of all my pretty good resists, I have this as well, and I am still rather squishy because I just have this one damage reduction item and then I have the Sims. And while the Sims provide a huge amount of damage reduction, it's 83.3%, it's just not enough to just easily tank stuff on a high TS, even with the curse, etc. So you gotta still be a bit careful, but with all the vitality, it will be fine. But as I said, I put a lot of Paragon points here, I have some Amethysts, and then yeah, I lose a bit of damage basically from not putting that into Intelligence. On the regular setups where you run Crimson or Orgles, you do have extra damage reduction anyway, so that is fine. Or, you know, you can also play the Briggs Wrath, and then you have the Raz's Volition here. You're also much more tanky, so you wouldn't have to have that high vitality. Obviously, this can only be done with a bit higher Paragons, but if you want to push to 150, you need a little bit of Paragons anyway, so 2.5k is probably kind of the minimum if you want to have a realistic chance. And the remaining passives, we definitely want the Bone Prison here, so this is kind of a must-have. Even with the Bone Armor Dislocation, you can't really keep this up for the Crispins. So this only lasts 2 seconds anyway, so a conventional rotation is 4 seconds. So that alone is already disqualifying it as the only CC. You do have the Zaze Stone, but it doesn't really proc all that much, even with the triple Bone Spear with your Sims. So Bone Prison is the way to go. This is especially good on a boss, because you can kind of like start out with the Dislocation, and then you usually proc the Bone Prison in succession, and you just, you know, keep blasting. And also, you know, when you're just far away, trying to maximize your Zaze value, you can actually do a lot more damage here. And Standalone is definitely a passive that you always want. It gives you a ton of toughness. So right now we have 73 million. If you remove this, we lose like 40% or so of our toughness. So this is a huge gain here. You should always have that. So that's about my setup here. As I mentioned, a few items could be improved, but it's not really necessary, so I'm just pushing with this. I'm actually like over 1,000 keys into the push, and I got very close, like a handful of times already, meaning that I was like 1 or 2 convention cycles away from actually clearing it in time. So yeah, we are getting there, and even with my imperfect gear, this is quite possible at that Paragon. So obviously not everyone is going to have my Paragon, so you can probably push it a bit lower, you know, 140, 145. I'd say in total the increase in DPS I could gain from having the perfect gear would be something like 15% more DPS. So definitely the crit chance here would be a big boost of something like, yeah, between 8 and 10% DPS. And then as well the Bone Spear here, which would especially be noticeable on the boss, because there you don't have the spreading malediction. This is additive, just like the Bone Spear damage rolls on your items. So on the boss you don't really get any value from this, and then the Bone Spear damage would be quite noticeable here. I would probably prefer the Bone Spear damage over the area damage here anyway if I would have such a lost time, but unfortunately I don't. Yeah, so that's about it. This is my setup, and hopefully you're gonna see the 150 clear soon. I'm quite excited to push with this. I actually really enjoy this. The build is so much fun with all the mobility, and well, it is hard to survive, but it's just amazing to blast. Like you can just run through the rift. It's such a different experience from the other builds that I've pushed with in the past. Even though I did play Bone Spear even in season 21 already, I was pushing like 141 back then, and I almost made that in that season. I didn't actually clear that tier, but I got very close. And now it's actually cool to you know, blast the 150 fit. So if you want to check out my pushes, then come to my live stream. And otherwise, hope you're going to enjoy my clear when it finally happens. And I hope you enjoy this video here. So see you guys next time.